very often we see it vice versa, right? We started with an IT system problem. Somebody was to a trade show or got a nice webinar and now wants to buy the latest, CRM system because that will solve all your problems. Or just the other day, the latest PLM system, because then our whole product development process will be much better.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. And this is that time of our show where we bring a very special guest. And for today, we have extremely special guest, that we are going to introduce in a second. But if you are dialing in for the first time, this is part of our interview series, the podcast series, for which we meet every Friday, anywhere from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern, depending upon the time zone of the guest. So if you have not caught previous episodes, make sure you check them out. We are going to bring a lot of exciting guests in the future as well. So stay tuned for those episodes. This is the time that you should be watching my wall to stay tuned on these episodes. So now I'm actually going to hand it over to Martin. Martin, do you want to introduce yourself? What your focus is these days?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Sam. So happy to be here. Thanks for the invite, and hello, everyone. I'm Martin. I work as a CIO in the German industry, medium-sized company mostly. And we're dealing with a digital transformation. We're dealing with a lot of business topics nowadays, of course, a lot of international trade questions coming up. And that keeps, of course, IT also very busy.
Yeah, so very interesting. Again, thank you so much for being here. I think we are going to peel a lot of layers in your experiences. We have discussed in the pre-show as well that you have had a lot of interesting experiences, so we are going to have a lot of fun there. Before we do that, some more questions for the audience. If you're in the audience joining for the first time, make sure you guys post your questions, comments, experiences, whatever. We are a big fan of creating that whole three-way conversation. So even though you are in the audience, but you are sort of part of the show, so post any questions, comments, anything that resonates with you, and we'll be touching them as we make progress to the show. So Martin, coming back to you again, one of the questions that we have, the standard question that we ask every single guest, because that is sort of the theme of the podcast, and we want to make sure that any episode that we bring in sort of ties with the overarching theme. And that is going to be your perspective on business growth.
So I think for me, there is always, of course, as a CIO, you usually maybe kind of used to or expected to come from the technology perspective, right? You're supposed to talk about cool technologies, AI, machine learning, predictive analytics, whatever. But I firmly believe that transformation, yes, it is something. It is enabled. Sometimes it's maybe even driven by technology. But in the end of the day, the really important part is the human. People are making the transformation, and they also are the decisive factor if transformation is successful or not. And then there is another few layers. And if I would have to pick the three most important, it's the human people, then the process and the data. And if you have fixed these topics or clarity on these topics, where you want to go and where you need to go with your business transformation, then it's okay to start talking about tech and tools and IT systems.
Yeah, so it's very interesting, and I kind of like your comment related to the technology being cool, and I don't know if you can hear me now better, because I did change a little bit settings, so I think you were struggling initially, but I hope now I'm slightly better. So glad that is out of our way. But going back to your comment related to technology being cool, okay, and when we look at the journey of any CIOs, I guess, or any technologist, any IT sort of leaders, right? They obviously struggle with the business and people side of things, regardless of whether they are going to admit or not, right? I mean, it's tricky. It's tricky, right? And
Right.
CIOs come from many different backgrounds, and sometimes they sort of underestimate why they would struggle from the people side of things, the process side of things. They sort of generalize that, I've done everything in IT probably. Maybe they have done a lot of things from the infrastructure perspective, and they are going to think that, ERP centric projects are going to be very similar. But they cannot be more wrong, right? So why is that? Maybe clarify that a little bit for CIOs.
Yeah. Right. Maybe let's go back a little bit also with my history or my background. I mean, I studied IT like 25 years ago, and actually my first job was software development. I did C programming. I mean, some may remember, and worked on the Linux kernel and spent ages and nights compiling kernels and C programs and stuff. So I'm really, by heart, I guess I'm a bit of a techie, of course. I have to be, and that's not. But I think when you look at the majority of people outside IT, I think they have primarily, of course, they want to use it. We're in an age of, I don't know, Apple iPhones and so on. You just use the tech. You don't want to deal with the things behind, and there is maybe even a growing gap. I just the other day at work we had an email that was sent out by the IT provider trying to explain an issue with Outlook, and there were terms in like REST APIs and Summer and whatnot, so all the tech terms. And then my boss, the CFO, called me and said, well, nobody understands that. What's going on? So I mean, to bridge the gap from the tech that is getting, I'd say yes, it's getting more and more complex if you look behind the curtain. What's possible and what's happening, and there's so much opportunities, but the gap to the user that just wants to do his job, maybe find some information he needs, there is no chance they can actually understand it. And it's also, I think, not the way to try to I don't know, train users to understand the tech language, but actually to find some middle ground and maybe put in some interface that does the translation work, because I think that's ultimately where you can win or lose in your game, also in a transformation. Because it's I don't know, if I ask my son, another example, maybe he's just using his MacBook, right? He's happy to have a MacBook. He knows how to use it. He knows much better than me how to use it. Actually, he's faster in doing almost everything with his MacBook. But once it doesn't work, he's kind of lost because he doesn't know nothing about the tech behind. And I think that's okay, because it's representative for the majority of people that work with tech today. And we can't expect everyone to have a computer science degree.
Yeah, so that's very interesting, and it's very interesting because we have very similar background, to be completely honest. Okay, and it's very rare. It's very rare for any of the technologists who are going to be really deep into technology to talk about business. Okay, I sort of grew up talking about business, so that's why I relate with business a lot more. And I think, based on the changes in the market, I'm pretty sure, I don't know whether you recognize Martin Fowler. I mean, he was the guy who actually coined these the agile concepts, etc. Right? So the whole concept for agile was that, okay, business first, guys. Okay, technology is great, business first. But he sort of, I mean, I joke that he sort of failed, in his attempt of teaching business, because when I'm talking to even enterprise architects, and that is one of the topics that you wanted to, sort of touch. So any of the enterprise architects, even if we talk to enterprise architects from companies like Deloitte and Accenture, they don't see business people as someone they can talk to, I guess, and that is sort of the resistance that I get when I'm talking to them. It's almost like, I mean, they sort of live in their own bubble and the world. Do you feel the same way when you are talking to technologists? Is that changing? What's been your experience?
Yeah, right. So I mean, in the end, probably we don't have to both, right? We don't have to teach everyone in business how to talk tech, and we don't have to teach everyone in tech how to talk business, right? But there needs to be at least some common understanding, I think, especially also in tech, with people that actually, I mean, somehow you need to pay for all of this, right? And there is no means in itself to run a great IT department or to deploy a cool software application to your users that you like from a technical perspective. But in the end, what we want to achieve is to look at it really from a business perspective. What is my business model? Where does my revenue come from? And how do I support creating this revenue in the best possible way? So we have efficient processes, we have happy customers, and we have an organization that overall can grow and run successful.
Yeah, so very interesting. So we have some comments, so we are going to touch on them, and then we are going to come back to our main topic, which is going to be business transformation. So we have one comment from the user. I don't know who this person is. We are not able to see your name. If you want to put your LinkedIn profile, maybe we'll be able to see. But thank you so much for joining. We have one more comment. Dan, thank you so much for joining. And Dan is asking, Martin, what do you tell CIOs that are running SAP ECC EHP4 and older, who are facing the 2025 deadline to upgrade at least to EHP5 on-prem, and they haven't started yet? So I don't know, Martin, how you are going to feel about this. It is going to be more of the political comment. But I'll let you address that.
Well, I mean, luckily, I'd say I never had to deal with this specific situation. But of course, I mean, what can you do about it? Best is to one, of course, talk with SAP, figure out what's their idea about it, and maybe what's potential mitigations you can have, and then of course also look into the business side. Personally, and that's probably not an answer, but I'm really a big fan of S/4HANA and the public cloud concept SAP is currently propagating forward. It's maybe not there yet, and it's certainly not the right answer for everyone. But it's a development that I like very much and that I really follow closely. And of course, I'd say the ideal situation, and it might not be possible in this specific case, but the ideal situation, of course, is that you can get your business in a state of readiness where you can jump from your current ECC6, whatever EHP it is, into the S/4HANA cloud offerings, because that might give you really a huge jump, one in terms of business capabilities and also technical opportunity to drop legacy stuff, and don't have to worry about in 10 years or so for the next transformation. What would happen if you do any intermediate step right now, right? But that's, of course, perfect scenario, which might in reality never happen.
Yeah, could not agree more. I think great way, of addressing that question. And I think Dan is saying sorry about the question. Dan, you don't have to be sorry. I mean, this is supposed to be open forum. I mean, you can ask whatever you want, and we'll try to address.
It's definitely a relevant topic. Then I agree.
We'll try to be as politically correct as possible, I guess. But thank you so much, Dan, once again. So, Martin, coming back to the whole topic of business transformation, right? So there are various versions of business transformation. Everybody has their own story. Everybody has their own sort of version of what business transformation really means. Okay, if you talk to IT, IT guys, obviously, these guys have done wonderful job. Whether you talk about any of the frameworks such as TOGAF or Zachman, those are some of the enterprise architecture frameworks, and they are going to talk about that. Hey, once you master these frameworks, you are sort of covered. Okay. Now, even inside those frameworks, architects are sort of fighting with each other. Okay. You have business architects. They are saying, hey, I'm not supposed to be reporting to enterprise architect. Okay. Enterprise architects are fighting with that. Okay. I mean, business. Come on. Now business is feeling that, okay, you probably don't know business because what I'm doing, you don't even get it. So where is the sort of disconnect, and what's your story of business transformation? Where do you see it? I guess maybe clarify that.
Yeah. So maybe first off, I think one of the key topics for me is I'd say mindset. really as an architect, and especially but also in any other role, actually, any kind of transformation, any leadership role you take on, and architects should be leaders. You're playing a team sport.
Yep.
And you can't win as an individual, and you can't win by telling, oh, that's not my problem if the ball hits the goal, right? You're in the same team. So you need to work together. You need to come to the table, agree on your common strategy, your common goals, your common objectives, and there should be a lot if you start from the business perspective. And then I must admit, and many of my architecture colleagues criticize me for that. I'd say I'm not a huge fan of all these frameworks. So I've done my TOGAF certificate and so on, and I looked at the frameworks. And I think they're great if you want to get let's say an understanding of what are the concepts, what are the connections, and how do things maybe fall together in the big picture. But then I believe you need to find your own approach to enterprise architecture as a whole. You need to develop your own idea and understanding. And for me, as I said, the key is it's a team sport. And then it's about structuring and evolving business towards more success. So I try to get also, I mean, they're probably not simple enough yet, but I try to get very simple models that I can talk to board managers as well as IT guys, as business managers and so on, where I say, okay, you have a business model or more. So start to talk about your business model. Start to at least understand it in a way that you could write it down, because every company, of course, has a business model or two. But many companies I saw so far, they would struggle to write it down in a few concise words. And if you probably if you would ask 10 managers in the average company, you would come up with at least 5 different descriptions of the business model, I assume. So start there, write the business model down, and then also it's easier to discuss what's changing. Like if you have a company, I worked for a big industrial company a couple of years ago. They were really changing from selling their product to basically renting the product, pay by the hour. And that's a huge change. If you don't think that through, what does that mean for my whole organization? It's pretty likely that you will have a huge disaster afterwards. Because then supporting the business model, you have an understanding, or you need an understanding of your revenue streams, your end-to-end processes, and the key objectives and the key elements that drive these revenue streams and end-to-end processes. And then you can translate them, and that's for me, I mean, that's my favorite concept overall. Then you can translate these end-to-end processes and value streams into what capabilities do I need as an organization, as a business, to realize them. So like, if we assume again we go into a fly-by-the-hour model or something, then of course we need the capability to track operational data in real time from my products, because otherwise I can't guarantee that it works by the hour, and I can't charge by the hour, and I can't do the maintenance in time, and so on and so on. So I need to develop maybe new capabilities. And then with these capabilities, with the clarity of what I need to be able to do as an organization, then it's time to dig deeper and talk about the processes, the functions and roles, and of course also then about IT systems. And very often we see it vice versa, right? We start with an IT system problem. Somebody was to a trade show or got a nice webinar and now wants to buy the latest, CRM system, because that will solve all your problems. Or just the other day, the latest PLM system, because then our whole product development process will be much better.
Yeah, it's always fun. I mean, and I completely agree with your comment related to the frameworks, and the frameworks are more of the guidelines, and it's up to you. I mean, it's almost like a tool. It's up to you how you want to use them. I mean, they are not meant to be as prescriptive. If they are going to be too prescriptive, I don't know how they can be any framework, I guess, right? And that's where people sort of lose the sight of the whole business objective. That frameworks are framework. Don't sort of mug up. You need to understand the intent. Don't forget the business. And I don't know where you get this perspective, because 90% of the IT folks that I deal with, they struggle with it. And I don't know if it is because you probably grew up in a business background or something. I mean, that's always a possibility that you understand business a lot more, but that's not something that I see with other technology folks. I mean, they struggle with concepts such as, for example, let's say, I mean, you talk about microservices, okay? Microservices, composability, great concept, but they don't sort of understand what is an ERP. I mean, there are people who are trying to create and recreate an ERP, using the microservices, the composability layer, etc. And sometimes it's crazy arguments. I don't think you can do that. And I don't know where you stand in that position. Maybe you tell us, your position, why ERP is so different, and how ERP-driven business transformations are going to be slightly different than your, I guess, traditional software development, I guess.
Yeah. So I mean, definitely in general, I'd say you need these experts also that are able to design microservice architectures, that are able to run your hybrid cloud concepts, your connectivity, the whole interface topics. I mean, I believe firmly, if you want to run a business transformation, of course, you need something behind backstage, right? You need a lot of capabilities, technical capabilities, not business capabilities, but technical capabilities behind the stage. To build, and that's not necessarily your question you just asked, but to build also something like a technical reference architecture. I'm a big fan of a concept called like a horizontally layered architecture, at least from a thinking perspective. It's not necessarily something you achieve easily, especially with standard commercial software off the shelf, but you need these kind of idea of these layered architecture where you have user channels, then you have your process layer from a logical perspective, an integration layer, and then you have your application services and all the stuff behind there. And sidelined, which sometimes gets forgotten, is with a central IDM or identity and access management layer, right? Otherwise, you're gonna die of complexity. But then with this technical reference architecture or framing architecture, of course, you want to run, at the end of the day, you want to run, I don't know, a customer order. Your customer orders a product and you want to be able to sell them this product as efficient as possible. And that's not a technical problem, right? It's a business problem. And ERP systems are supposed, and they sometimes barely do that, but they are supposed to support these business processes. Many ERP systems, especially, let's say, older generation, are built also from a rather technical perspective in my perception, I feel. And they never, ever support process. They support tasks, right? You do tasks. You can store the information created by the task. You can recover the information created by another task and use it in your task, but they don't really connect the process. So you never have this visibility, and this is why lots of the logic is hidden in the brains of your employees and your users of the ERP system. And when you then start to change the ERP system, for example, you want to go from ECC6 to S4HANA, then you destroy the process, because people have the process in their head and they don't find it in the system anymore, what they need to do. And this is why I believe you need to start from the business process and the people that work with it.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting segue, because we have one of the questions from Dan again. So he's asking about RISE, and obviously, if you talk to any ERP vendors, and this is not about SAP, obviously you spent a lot more time in the SAP ecosystem, so you might be able to talk a lot more about SAP. But the way, ERP vendors, 90% of them, the way they position their products and processes, and obviously, they all are trying to sell, I get it. But, for the customer who has not gone through this process, they might not be as fortunate as having a CIO like Martin. For them, it's like buying an ERP is like picking a product from Home Depot, and they are going to feel that, hey, I'm going to buy this product, I'm going to magically install, it's going to give me the processes, it's going to print my financial statements, and I'm off to the races. That's how they think in their head. And RISE is sort of aligned with that. And obviously, vendors are trying to sell that, hey, RISE is super easy, 90 days. And sometimes it's kind of funny, okay? And I don't know whether you find this funny or not, okay? They're all arguing, hey, I can bring your ERP live within like 15 days, 90 days. I've seen claims such as this. Like, why? Crazy.
Yes,
so, Where do you stand on that?
Right. I mean, I'm not of course, I'm not an SAP salesperson, right? But I think what I understand in terms of RISE for me is I translate it into the private cloud offering of SAP, which means it's not this future model, maybe what public cloud currently, I think they coin it as grow with SAP, I think, is which for me would be kind of at least currently the kind of the end game where you want to go. But this is something which is feasible maybe if you're new to SAP, if you didn't have an ERP at all right now, or you had a non-SAP ERP, then this grow approach might be a great idea. Or if your ECC6 is so outdated, so legacy, that you're actually, as a business, not as an IT, as a business, happy to throw it away and start new. And RISE for me is kind of, it's a compromise. It's the bridging approach to get from the legacy ERP world into the modern S/4HANA world, with a certain, at least, opportunity to fix some of the stuff you destroyed in the past with any Z programs and customizations that might not be so beneficial now, but looked great 20 years ago. And it has, of course, the opportunity, and that depends on your organization. Some organizations might not need or like that, but it's an opportunity also to reduce the footprint the ERP system actually takes within your IT organization, because you can bring the whole hosting operations out of your data center if you still have one. And if you want to move to the cloud anyway, this is great if you get SAP out, right? You can hand over a lot of the operational tasks like SAP Basis also with this. And at least here in Germany, it's really tough to find good SAP Basis people, right? They are not available on the market. Either you learn on your own or you don't do it. And it's also not, it might not be the most relevant comment, but it's also not the most attractive job. If you go to school here in Germany and you ask someone, hey, what's your dream job? No one will say SAP Basis Administrator.
Really?
So I feel it's a bit of a dying breed, right?
Yeah.
And if you need to resolve that, and that was in my last employer, that was the case, we lost all our SAP Basis Administrator, then RISE might be a really great opportunity compared to any kind of outsourcing of your system.
Yeah, so very interesting comment. And I was thinking that, Germany was most passionate about SAP because, when I talk to anybody from Germany, they are all SAP. They are really loyalist, I would say, which is interesting. So now let's go back to your experience. And obviously, I found you through the whole SAP conference. And I don't know how you are going to feel about this comment. But you are kind of, positioned as more of the poster child of SAP, and I don't know if it is because, some of the best practices that they are trying to promote, and you really champion those, and there's nothing wrong about that, right? So SAP does have some very interesting products in their portfolio. I absolutely appreciate when it comes to LeanIX, and I think that is the right way of doing the ERP strategy for any company. Other sort of vendors are catching up to them, but they don't have the same vision, at least after the old CEO and the new CEO transition. And the new CEO seems to be getting that, okay, especially in the cloud, you have to care about enterprise architecture. Before that, ERP industry, they didn't even know what the hell enterprise architecture is. So now they are getting the sense of it, and the kind of new acquisition, especially when you talk about, Signavio, you talk about LeanIX. I think that's the right direction for the ERP industry, and I think you have utilized them successfully. So maybe touch a little bit, on that, where these tools sort of fit in the whole business transformation effort. If anybody's starting, why these tools are going to be critical, in the whole SAP S/4HANA layer, I guess.
Yeah, right. So yeah, let's start with LeanIX. I think I'm looking at LeanIX, working with LeanIX on and off since 2018. And back then it was not affiliated with SAP. It was just, for me, it was a great EAM tool, because in general, and that's also a very personal comment, of course, but in general, most of the EAM tools I know are fairly complex. Right? They try to do kind of sort of everything and be a one-hit wonder, or I don't know how you call it, but they try to be everything. And they are usually, they are so complex that even in larger organizations that that can afford a dedicated standing EAM team of 5 to 10 people.
Yeah.
It feels like you need to retrain even your own architects every year to actually use the tool properly, let alone the rest of the organization. You cannot have, I don't know, anybody from business work in these EAM tools. It's impossible, I'd say. And that leads to the point where your information about the landscape and also the concepts you want to propagate in terms of roadmaps, targets, and so on, always have to go through that bottleneck of the EA. And with tools like LeanIX, and there are a few others on the market that have similar ideas, you can actually, again, get into this collaboration mode. It's like team sport, right? People can put information in LeanIX without having training. They can do it without having retraining. They can do it without reading a manual. It's really simple. You have things like questionnaires you can send out. You have an easy way to connect to other systems like your CMDB, your knowledge management, and so on. And that's partially, I think that's what EAM in this part of the corner at least is. It's about connecting information, right? You want to connect existing information. You want to collect them maybe in central places, and you want to make them available so you can drive decisions based on information and data and not based on, I think it might be a good idea. So, and that's what LeanIX can do. And now, and I was quite fascinated. I just learned that this year, really, or realized it only this year. Now with all the work that SAP has put in and the connection, it didn't change LeanIX a lot yet. I think there's a lot to come. But what they do, and this makes a really fascinating big picture, they combine it with a Signavio tool set, which you just mentioned as well, and they just put in a third component, which is WalkMe. Maybe you heard of it. It's this digital adoption platform or user adoption platform. And if you put that together just from a building block perspective, you end up with with this big picture of you can come to your people with WalkMe, show them how to use the tools, how to find what they want to do, how to be successful in their specific tasks. You have Signavio, where you can really get clarity on your assist processes and start to understand how these processes impact your business, but also then to the technical side, how these processes impact your technology, your tools, and so on. And with LeanIX, you get all the clarity in how your tools are actually connected, how they exist in a very lean way without getting, I don't know, obstructed by the tool and the complexity of information you're kind of asked. And this together is really, I think I like that concept really a lot, to say, okay, this is kind of a business transformation suit at some point in time, if you put it together right, that helps you to solve a lot of questions quickly.
Yeah, so very interesting. And let's touch a little bit more on that connection aspect of LeanIX that you had mentioned. And I don't know how much connection is going to be important. Some of the apps in enterprise architecture can be siloed. They don't need to be as tightly integrated, I guess, right? Depending upon the purpose of the app, I guess, in the enterprise architecture. So let's talk about LeanIX, right? So I don't know how deeply connected it needs to be. For example, let's say if you talk about any of the ERP module, you cannot simply tear it apart, from ERP. It doesn't work that way, because that's going to be just one data model, and you are sort of moving it together, right? Now the question is going to be, for example, the way your journey started with LeanIX. You started sort of the agnostic, and one of the priorities that CIOs are going to have is to reduce a little bit of vendor control, right? You don't want any of the vendors, whether, I don't care, whether SAP, Infor, whatever, Salesforce, you don't want vendor to, and that's part of the whole CIO strategy, the IT strategy, that you want to make sure that you sort of own your strategy, you sort of own your architecture. And now these tools, if you look at LeanIX, they obviously are going to claim that, you can connect with any tools, and any organization of the kind of size that you have worked with, they are going to have probably SAP, Salesforce, Workday. I don't know what all you had. Maybe you were pure play SAP shop, and that's completely okay. But in general, you are going to have multiple tools, and in general, these tools are going to be slightly more agnostic from the enterprise architecture perspective. Also, the category, I would say, the WalkMe that you had mentioned, it's more of the digital adoption platform. It's called DAP. So that's a slightly different category, okay? So even for DAP, the whole idea of DAP is that you are going to have so many different tools. It's very, very, very hard to teach. I'll give you a tool. Hopefully that's going to help you the transition a little bit. I mean, but tool is a tool, they only go so far, right? So overall, I guess, let's say if you were the CIO or of any organization and you were trying to create this strategy, would you rather go with something that is going to be SAP owned, or would you go for slightly more agnostic? Because in this case, I guess the integration is not going to be as critical for these 2 or 3 tools. So where do you sort of stand on that, and what's going to be your advice for other CIOs, I guess?
Yeah. So I mean, my personal take on that, of course, is for Linux especially, I think it doesn't matter if you have SAP or not or whatnot, because it is still a very generic and agnostic EAM tool.
Yeah.
There is more functions coming in that make it easier also to connect an SAP system if you have one, and get more information about, for example, the cloud services from SAP you use and modules and so on. You can easily get more information on that, but it's not the core feature, I'd say, of Linux. For me, it's still an agnostic EAM tool that is one of the most efficient and most easiest to implement and run to tool that also drives a pretty quick return of investment usually. If you go for example, also application rationalization, the classics, or just need to get a clarity on your, 20 subsidiaries and key processes and who uses what, and get that out of Excel and whatnot. And then you can drive pretty quick return, I believe. I mean, Signavio, of course, at least right now, only makes sense really if you have SAP. If you have an ERP system, then Signavio is probably a good choice. If you don't use SAP as your core ERP system, you might be well off with another process management suite as in general. So I think the connection, yes, it's nice, but it's not the key driver for Linux, definitely. I mean, there's also integrations like with ServiceNow, with the Confluence and so on, with Jira. So you can use that, and you can even, and that's nice. I saw a presentation lately from an EA colleague from Switzerland. They really they brought the integration game to another level. They had like a dozen of EA tools and UML design language tools and everything. And they built API connections for everything and got the data into Linux and had their data model, which is the source. Where does it come from? And a fraction of it was SAP. The rest was other systems. So there I'm not worried. But as I said, with Signavio, it's a different story, at least right now.
Yeah, so very interesting. So let's do some more, on these tools from the licensing pricing perspective as well. And I don't know where they stand. And obviously, the licensing and pricing is changing on a daily basis, right? Of these tools. So do you see? So let's say if you look at the scope of Linux, Signavio, as well as Walk.me, I mean, all of these, I would put them in very similar bucket. And I don't know if they are going to be more of the one-hit wonder where you are going to use them only during implementation, and after that they are not going to be as relevant, or do you see them as part of your continuous improvement process? Because when you are going to buy this as part of the SAP portfolio, most likely you are paying for them continuously. Now, are you going to use them throughout is the question, because for SAP, obviously you are paying for SAP, but do you need them like till you have SAP, I guess?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess so, yes. And it's probably also, it's an interesting discussion if you think it, for example, like with your business, with your CFO, right? You go into the discussion and then you have to explain. And that's actually, it's a realistic problem, really. So you already pay quite some money for your ERP system. You pay a lot of money for your CRM system, and then you have maybe some Microsoft Office 365 in place. And now you're coming along and say, okay, and now I want to buy another software to manage all this landscape, right? To have your is architecture on. Then you want to buy another software to manage your processes. And then you come along maybe with WalkMe or something, and you say, okay, I need a digital adoption platform as well, so users can actually right use all the tools that are put in place. Where you might ask correctly, I'd say, why is it not part of your tool? Why is an ERP system? Or why does an ERP system require a digital adoption platform on top of it so users can use it? So that's, I think it's a valid question. And it might not be the case for everyone, right? Hopefully it's, I mean, I said, I don't sell the software, so I hope not everybody needs that. but there might be good cases. And usually yeah, it's a trade-off, but you can't live without an ERP system, right?
Yeah.
So it's probably better to invest extra to have this ERP system really efficient and to make the best value out of your ERP system, instead of having it in this kind of state, 80% working or not working, but not getting the real efficiency out of it, because people have to circumvent the ERP system, redo some stuff in Excel or in paper and so on. So I think from an as-is perspective, usually these tools pay for themselves, kind of, if you don't overdo or just get them for fun, right?
Yeah.
Because you solve a business need. You have users that struggle with your systems. You do not have control of your processes. You don't know the processes, so you're not able to manage them. You can't make them visible. You need kind of also a management documentation, maybe for ISO certificates, for cybersecurity certificates, and so on. And then, of course, you should reuse that. That's one thing we did, for example, in my last company with the Lean IX. We really, I mean, it's called Lean IX for a reason, right? You shouldn't overclunk it with data and information, but we try to use it for as many reasonable cases as possible. So we started to do a very lean project portfolio management with the tool. In addition to applications, then we started to look into tech components more. We put in IT contracts, at least to a certain extent, so we're able to for example, to track negotiation dates and so on. We put IT costs in because we do not have a specific cost solution in that company. And we also started, for example, to put IT risks in. So this gives us, of course, the more information we put in that is relevant for a current business need or operational need, the more value we get out of it. And I think that's the other part I would strongly recommend, of course. If you have a tool, use it for as much as reasonable possible, right? So don't misuse it, but don't buy 2 process management tools just because you have SAP and Oracle or whatnot, right? That's not the way to go.
Yeah, that's probably not the ideal combination, I guess. You don't want to have 2 rivals competing for the same pie, I guess. That could be a fun experience. So before I forget, I mean, one minor clarification I wanted to provide for the listeners. I think you seem to be referring the EAM term. Sometimes in the ERP community, that is also known as enterprise asset management. But my understanding is that you are referring to enterprise architecture management. Both of them could have similar acronym. So just a minor clarification there for the listeners. So now we have some more comments here. So we have, from Jen, do you have any recommendations for tools to clean up data before or during the transition to S/4HANA? I mean, this is probably going to be an argument and the question for everybody. When do you clean it? I mean, and some people are coining the term phase 0. What is going to be the scope of phase 0? Some people have argued that, 5% budget for phase 0. Can you clean data in that? I'm not too sure about that, right? So what's your position on this? I mean, when do you clean your data? What's the right stage for cleaning your data? How much should you be investing in your phase 0, etc.?
Yeah, right. I mean, again, there is no one right answer, I believe.
Yeah.
But I think it depends on your starting position. So I mean, how old is your current ERP system? How much data is in there that might be problematic, right? What's the amount of data you would like to get rid of?
Come on, Martin. 90% of those cases, it's going to be really bad.
Exactly. So and that's then where the next question come in. So what's your approach to go to S/4HANA? Do you have to go brownfield, so doing a technical kind of in-place upgrade and keep your existing system and existing data therefore as well? So then, of course, cleansing your data might have quite some relevance, right? Because you know that the data will be there otherwise after your transition. But if you go for a selective conversion, or even you're lucky enough to go for greenfield, I'd say nowadays, at least in a latter case, no data cleansing. If you go greenfield, I'd say forget about data cleansing. It may sound nice, it may feel good, but in the end, the old system, you will shut down the old system. You will archive it in some kind of legacy archiving solution, which is much more important than to get a good legacy archiving solution to keep the relevant data for text and so on. but not keep the old ERP6 system running. I think that's also sometimes a huge challenge that is easily forgotten. You need to shut down the old system afterwards if you go for greenfield, which means you need to find a way to archive that data. And there are quite some nice solutions, but they are, of course, I'd say kind of country specific, because you need to adhere to local laws in terms of archiving your old system. And then there is this selective conversion approach, where you basically say, okay, you have your old ERP system, you have the new S4 system, and then you have exactly that. You have a transformation or transition software that helps you select the information you want to take over to the new system. And I think there, at least in the German market, there is 3 or 4 vendors that are kind of popular that are around, and they have a bit of different approaches, but they usually are quite well in terms of success if you do it right. They come with a price tag. I think that's also important. They add quite some cost to a project, which means that especially this selective conversion approach, at least if you do a direct comparison with the same company, usually is the most expensive one, because you have to add extra license cost for the cleansing software. You have to have extra effort for migrating the data. So by now, I'm a fan of not doing selective conversions, and I'm even a bigger fan of not doing brownfield. So if there is a reasonable, let's say, cause for updating your business processes, changing the way you work, it makes a lot of sense to try to go greenfield, and thereby also solve the data cleansing problem.
So very interesting comment. So clarify that a little bit. I mean, so why would you not recommend brownfield? And let's say if CIOs, they are undertaking the transformation efforts, why is brownfield going to be problematic, I guess?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, again, it depends. There might be companies, and I know at least one in my direct surroundings. They have an ERP system that was in great shape. They had great governance. They had a business that was very strict and very adhered to standard, very clean processes. They can do brownfield, and they're very happy with it. But for most companies that I know, and I assume there is much more of them out there, there is too much legacy in there. So there's old processes that maybe were designed 20 years ago for a different business model or for revenue streams that work totally different nowadays. There is legacy data in, right? There's a lot of modifications in that might have been necessary in the past. But if you look at the S/4HANA Clean Core strategy and the modular approach you can take today with the new technology and integration platforms, you don't want that integrated in your ERP core anymore. So if you, in this situation, if you do brownfield, you basically cement all your legacy for the next decade at least. Because I cannot imagine a company that after spending millions on a brownfield project and then getting feedback to the board from all the users, oh, nothing changed, because that's what happens in brownfield. Nothing changes from a user perspective, that anybody will give you funding to do the cleanup and innovation phase afterwards. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, could not agree more. I think great, point. So we are going to touch on some more comments we have, so I think Sana is there in the room as well. Thank you so much, Dan, for clarifying that, and I think she's saying hi. Then we have one more comment, I think that is coming from Sana. So Martin, can you please talk about achieving business efficiency through transformation? I guess that's $1 million question, Martin. So please help us here.
Right. I mean, that's an interesting topic, really, because we had exactly this discussion just the other day, also again in my board with the last company, and they are really it's a German machining company, right? In Germany, machining companies, we are really about efficiency. It's all we talk about all day long, right? And we had to come to the hard conclusion, actually, that sometimes it's not about efficiency, at least not in the first place, but it's about effectiveness. And that's it might sound like just a wordplay, but it's really a big difference. Because what we did, we used Signavio, the process insights tools, to look at our current processes in SAP. And Signavio gave us a lot of indicators. Here you have a chance for automation, here you have a chance for efficiency, and then. And then we talked to the actual functional experts of these topics, and we figured out that, I understand the logic why the system says there is an efficiency gain possible. But as a matter of fact, we don't really use this process in SAP. We do that in Excel. So the understanding was, first we need to make the processes effective for what they are supposed to do, and sometimes this is the starting point. And if you try to make them efficient in the first place, or if you try to get efficiency into the wrong process setup, then you're optimizing the wrong problem basically. So that was one big realization we had a couple of weeks ago, really, with the whole business, and that was lucky. But in general, of course, the model that I tried to draft before is the answer kind of for me to that question. So you start understanding your business model, you validate, is that still my model? And then you need to look at end-to-end processes. And the fact alone, or the ability alone to get your business to think and look at end-to-end processes is already quite a transformation, because usually you have organizational functional silos and everybody is working in a fraction of the end-to-end process and optimizing that, but is usually not aware of the interface, maybe sometimes the interface to the next step of the end-to-end process, but certainly not of the interface to the next step, right? So you pretty quickly lose sight of the overall end-to-end process, and also the impact your local optimizations might have on step 2, 3, 4, 5. And so I believe starting to talk, at least on a certain level of your organization, to talk about these end-to-end processes and get clarity in who is contributing to the end-to-end process and what is the overall objectives of the end-to-end process. You talk like lead to cash or plan to fulfill, some of these. This is what can drive your efficiency.
Okay, amazing. So we have some more comments. We are going to touch on them. So I think Jen is satisfied with the answer. So good job, Mark, there. Jatin is actually liking the show. Again, thank you so much for joining. And then he has already shared screen with the LinkedIn audience. So one of the topics that we really wanted to hit on and touch on, and that's another war, that is always there. And that is going to be, hey, the whole equipment IT versus the product IT, especially for, I think you had the electronics manufacturing company, that was the example. But any of these days, at least, most manufacturing companies, if they are going to be in some sort of CapEx equipment, then they are going to have some sort of product IT as well, because especially with AI now, everything is going to have some sort of IT. So where is the focus for the CIO? And there is always a debate about who is CIO, who's CTO, what is the responsibility of a CIO. So talk about that a little bit, where is that, I guess?
Right. So, I mean, it depends. That's the usual answer, right? But I think in general, what I always try to set up as a model, at least kind of a framework, is to think in more or less four domains. So we have the traditional kind of home turf of corporate IT, which I would call like process IT. So you are responsible for all the IT systems you run your typical business processes on. Then you have your equipment IT, at least in like OT, I would call it equipment IT. So it's everything on the shop floor. It's machines, it's control PCs, and it's testing tools, and so on and so forth. And then there is the product, and many of our products nowadays, of course, have also some sort of digital footprint, right? They might even have a network connection, they might have Wi-Fi, they have Bluetooth, whatnot. So they have IT in it to some extent. So this is product IT, and then there is a domain I'd like to call service IT, and this is probably pretty similar or close to process IT sometimes, but the big difference for me is that this goes outside of the company. It talks to customers, it talks to suppliers, your service IT, and even might have value-added services like software subscriptions or some cloud software you provide with your product. And I think in all of these domains, corporate IT should at least have some visibility and should play a certain role. But it really depends on your organization, also the size of your organization. For example, in my last organization, we had the clear decision, and it was just basically taking the domain model and talk about it. I think that's a good use for the domain model. We had the decision that cybersecurity is based in corporate IT, also for equipments, also for products, and also for services. So we have one central position for cybersecurity because it's quite tough to stay on top of cybersecurity topics, right? And not everybody has the time for it. So it's good you have your dedicated staff for this. And two, the company was just not big enough to afford 4 or 5 cybersecurity experts in each domain to make sure they all are able to run their job. So it was a question for us then of efficiency, really, to say, okay, we centralize cybersecurity. On the other hand, especially in equipment IT, of course, I mean, you have a lot of process know-how going on, right? You need production experts and so on that are able to run the machines. They have the connection, and the interface always is not that clear. But it helps to look at the domain model and then have a conversation about it. I think that's for me the general answer. Have a conversation about it and make sure that you do not duplicate functions and have too much redundancy in your skills you need to build in the organization. That would be my general rule of thumb. And where you can centralize it to save money, get more efficient, consolidate your skills, do it. Where you might need to decentralize, for example, for speed, so you are more agile, more quick in realization. Again, then you have to do it.
Yeah, so maybe talk about some of the trade secrets, I guess, for a lot of people who might not know how to do this. And from my personal experience, to be completely honest, when you work in these enterprise workloads, right, enterprise companies, I mean, you are probably going to have 2,000 people, 200 people in IT, probably 20 departments. Everybody have their own sort of personalities, and you are sort of trying to centralize the cybersecurity. But I am just a guy. I'm writing this widget and app. I'm simply going to promote it. So, obviously I don't like IT to be coming in my way, when I'm trying to run my business. Yes. But then you need to be involved because cybersecurity, right? So how do you strike the balance?
Yeah. Well, I think again, it gets a people topic, right?
Yeah.
I think it's utterly important, especially in some of these key roles like cybersecurity as well, to find also people that have communication skills, right? Soft skills. It's not only about, I mean, that makes life not much easier, right? But it's not always only about the tech skills. You need people that want to communicate, that like to communicate. There was a bit of a saying on an enterprise architecture conference I was lately. It was a year ago, so maybe one guy asked, like, how much time do you spend at your desk? And we took that as a kind of a KPI where we said, well, a good enterprise architect actually should not spend a lot of time at his desk, right? He should be out there talking with people, because this is where the solutions actually are happening. Yeah. So I think it's really about communicating and also really always remembering that mindset. It's a team sport, right?
Yeah.
It's not production versus IT. It's not software development versus cybersecurity, right? But we're in the same team. We play the same game. Also, it might not look like it sometimes, and we have the same goal.
Yeah, so amazing. So I think we are close to our time right now. So I don't know if you are going to have any sort of closing advice and where people can find you if they need to find you.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, you find me on LinkedIn. Always happy to communicate, to share, and to learn. I think that's probably the key also to growing, right? I like to learn, I like to share ideas, and I also like to listen to ideas of others. I think I learned a lot even in our conversation today, right, in that hour. And I think, yeah, just stay curious, keep an open mind. And I believe transformation is great, right? That's maybe the final closing. Transformation is great. Do it. There's no alternative.
Yeah, could not agree more. I think we all need to learn a lot. I mean, that's what makes this industry really beautiful. That's been my personal experience. So Martin, I mean, you are awesome. I feel when I'm talking to you, I can talk to you. That's not the sense I get, with a lot of other IT leaders. So thank you so much for doing that. I think we are going to bring you on, another time, maybe in the next couple of quarters. But again, thank you so much for your time and insights. It's been super helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for listening in, for the cool questions, especially Dan. I remember these questions. Thank you very much. It was really fun.
All right. So thank you so much, everybody. If you joined for the first time, this was part of our industry series or the podcast interview series for which we meet every Friday. So make sure you guys stay tuned for the next episode. We are going to come back with many exciting guests in the future around this time on Friday, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern. The best way to know about this is just follow my feed and probably hit the bell button. So again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. I'll see you next.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.